The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jameson Rabbit, and the man joining me this week, he wears lederhosen in his loungewear. His name is Mike Roth.
They're very comfortable.
Yeah?
I like belts, but every once in a while you feel like suspenders, but you don't want to have to do the clippy things. Get pants with them built in, and it even comes with a little bib. So when you're eating, it goes right onto your lederhosens.
You know, it makes sense. The more you explain it, the more it makes sense. I feel like a fool for not following through on this.
I really don't see why it's not a fashion anymore. It's a really practical summer-type garb. I don't know why people are not wearing it. Wear it. Be a trendsetter.
Sold. I will follow suit. Watch out, ladies. Next summer, we're all going to be in lederhosen. It's going to be so great.
I actually have a pair of lederhosen.
Do you?
I got it from a Halloween store that was going out of business. Can't fit in it anymore. Too big.
I have an apron that makes it look like you're wearing lederhosen when you have it on. That's as close as I've gotten to it.
But that's still pretty cool.
That's all right. Let's talk about movies and not German loungewear. And I'm going to get us started with our first film on our streaming spotlight. It's a film called The Dig from director Simon Stone. It stars Carey Mulligan and Ralph Fiennes. Ralph Fiennes plays a man named Basil Brown. Now, this is a true story. Basil Brown is brought in with the war on the door, World War II on the doorsteps of England. He's brought in to help a widow, Edith Pretty, played by Carey Mulligan, and help her figure out what may lie under the surface of these earth mounds that are on her property. Basil is not one of the big-name established archaeologists, but he has an idea of how to go about this. So as he and his small team begin to unearth a growing treasure beneath these mounds, we also begin to unearth a richer story than you would expect. There's a lot going on in this film. Basil doesn't know that Edith, her health is failing. He's also faced with the snobby archaeologist from the British Museum who tries to kind of muscle in on his discovery and big time him. And this will take over. There's odd romance angles in here. There's also a couple comes in to join them to work on this dig. A couple named Stuart and Peggy, played by Ben Chaplin and Lily James. They enter, and their relationship is obviously unhealthy. They're very distant, especially Stuart, very distant and unreachable for Peggy. We find out fairly early on that's because he's a closeted homosexual, and he's trying to keep up appearances, but kind of to the detriment of their marriage. And Peggy also begins to fall for Edith's nephew, Rory, who is about to get sent off to war. So that's she's having a rough time relationship-wise. Yeah. And there's bits about that, and what makes Basil's story so important is that his discovery ended up unearthing this huge Viking ship and a bunch of accoutrement that came with it. Is that it changed what we knew at the time about the Dark Ages. A lot was assumed, and he brought things up, and of course the snobby museum types was like, well, that's not possible.
Yeah.
Until he proved him wrong, and made it really important. And as he was kind of poo-pooed by the professionals, Edith passed away. She decided to donate all of the treasures and discovery to the British Museum. She passes away. She says, make sure Basil's name is on this.
Yeah.
And when they finally put it up after the war, Basil's name is nowhere to be found. And it wasn't until very recently that he was attributed what he had earned.
But they didn't mention that in the movie.
Right.
And that's... I really did like how this played out. It, very much like a British comedy or drama where there's a lot of different stories going on in order for this to move around, but it's not... in sensationalism. It doesn't have that overwhelming sense of dread or extreme happiness. It just kind of plays it like life is. Right. Unfortunately, this is a true life story based totally in fiction. Again, a lot of movies do this. They have the liberties, but in the Basil Brown situation, they made it seem like in the movie that he was recognized, and that was an inspiring part of the movie, but the actuality, he wasn't recognized until a couple years in our...
right.
We also have the main character, Edith Petty, who was portrayed as a young 35-year-old woman who is having health problems. She's actually a 50-something-year-old woman in real life, and it's getting a lot of flack from the community of saying, hey, women after 40 have a hard time getting into the acting career. Why'd you get a younger person? You also have the Stuart and Peggy Piggott story, where we really don't know if Stuart was gay or not, and they were married until the 50s. A couple of decades after, they were separated because Stuart went to war, and he was in India for quite a few years. They didn't get separated until like 53, where they made it seem like it happened right away because Stuart was gay. We don't know. We really don't know. Peggy was also a very acclaimed archaeologist beforehand. In this one, she shows up in a dress and it's her first dig. It's like, and I get it. And the Rory character wasn't even existent.
Sure.
And that bothers me when someone says this is a true story, this is history, you got to learn this because this is knowledge that you could pass down, and people watch movies.
But I don't think it's sold that way. I don't think that's how this movie was sold in any way.
Anytime someone's like really harps
based
that
on
this
actual
is true,
events is what it says at the beginning. That's all based on actual events.
It should say loosely based.
I think
on
that
events.
there's an understanding though when you say like based on true story or it's a biopic. Biopic is more like these are facts, these are events that happen. We have the at least the agreement of the subject matter that this is how their life went. Like we talked about with Ray last week. And based on actual events means some of these things happened. And we tell a story around actual events.
And I mention this every time there's a biopic and I have problems with real things. People don't know the difference. People do.
But it got you to look it up, didn't it?
It did.
There you go.
Most people don't. It's not their job. That's their job to go get entertained and go, oh, I learned something, and this is true. And it's not.
We're not watching a documentary. It's based on actual events. Yeah. It got you and I to go and look up what was true about this and learn more.
I feel like there should be some responsibility. Okay. At least inform people that.
As far as what we got on the screen, though, I think was really good. I agree. It tiptoed the line of almost getting soap opera-y with the romance angles, but it smartly pulled back right before they crossed the line with going too far into that realm. Ralph Fiennes is he's tremendous in everything.
I think they packed in a lot of story in such a short amount of time.
That's the thing. Yeah, I thought you could have fit. I think there was almost more story than they could fit into this movie.
This could have been a miniseries, but it didn't feel like a miniseries at all.
It could have been a British miniseries. Carey Mulligan also has quickly become one of those actresses who I'm just an actress I'm watching for. Yeah. She's in something with Promising Young Woman last month, which I think she should be nominated for. And then this and previous things, suddenly I'm like, Carey Mulligan's in it. I'm definitely checking it out.
Most of these actors were fantastic.
Yeah.
The lady who played Peggy Piggott, Lily James,
love her.
She was fantastic. Ralph Fiennes, he was fantastic. Even the little boy, Archie Barnes, I think he did a great job. And his story, I was watching with someone else, that brought tears of what this boy was doing for his mother. And I mean, all around, all these little relationships and stuff that they had in here were just fantastic. It really didn't feel like something that was in 2 hours. I watched many lives.
Yeah.
And I thought that was fantastic.
I agree. What did you end up giving The Dig?
I gave it a 3, mostly because of my opinion about saying something's true when it's not.
Sure. Yeah, I really enjoyed how they were able to tell the story and what they did with it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I love it. It's an enjoyable film. Let's move on, sir. What we have next?
I have The Little Things, directed
yeah.
by John Lee Hancock. Denzel Washington plays Joe Deacon. Sorry.
You just call him Deke.
I will just call him Deke. It starts off with him. He's a small-town deputy sheriff, and he's kind of called back to the big city, L.A., to drop off some stuff, and he ends up sticking around to help out the new detective, Jim Baxter, played by Rami Malek. They both have two different ways of doing things, and they are tracking down a serial killer, one that Joe believes was around when he was doing the same job back in L.A. He was a little rogue, and that's the reason why he's not doing that job anymore. And a lot of this is hunting down the serial killer, which we don't find out is Jay Leto until much later into the film. I like Denzel. I like Rami Malek.
I don't know that Rami Malek was good in this. I think Denzel was great as always. I think Jared Leto he plays the over the top weirdo that he's kind of been going for recently. Yeah. I think Rami Malek was miscast in this movie. I don't think he served a purpose in this film. I like the first half hour of this where it felt like a lot of movies that I was expecting this to be like, your True Detectives, your Zodiac, your Bone Collector, any of these movies, these crime thrillers, some of them starring Denzel.
Feels pretty gritty.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, I know where this is going. And then it just, I don't know, around the time both of these guys kind of got this fixation on who their suspect was going to be, despite having no evidence.
Yeah.
And they're going after Albert Sparma and this and that. And it just fell apart. And as the movie went further along, it felt like the movie fell apart more and more and that there was no tension. In the final act of a serial killer drama thriller, there was no tension for me, and I was so disappointed by that.
And pretty much, without giving away the ending, it's pretty much the third act that brought this down to 2.
Yes.
Sorry, spoiler alert, spoiled my score.
But still, it did. That final act was a huge letdown in this.
Yeah, and it made me feel at the end that I wasted 2 hours of my life. Like the director was like, you don't need to have good endings. And all right, well, I don't have to enjoy your movie.
Yeah, I feel like they focus so much on like the old school versus new school between Denzel and Rami Malek. And it just, I don't know, there was a handful of like impactful moments in here, but so much of this movie, when I walked away with it, just left me wanting for what could have or should have been.
Yeah.
It seems very easy, and sometimes we harp about like, oh, you just made the same movie over and over again, right? But you kind of have an expectation. You kind of know where this should build, where you should build tension. And I watched this with my wife, and my wife was like, that movie was terrible. And I was like, I don't think it was terrible. I see where they wanted to go, and it just felt like they lost the course.
I feel like the ending could have worked if they concentrated more on the characters than the case. But they didn't. They concentrated on the case, and they made us invested in the case. We wanted to see this case have a resolution that should have fit what they were building up to, but they didn't. And therefore, I felt like I wasted so much of my life.
I absolutely
agree. And I know
agree.
it's 2 hours, but 2 hours is precious.
No, I absolutely agree, because I was really, really looking forward to this. This is a movie, this cast, this genre is a genre I love. And this cast is great. I said, here we go.
Yeah.
And I watch it, and I'm halfway into it, I'm going, oh no. Wait a minute. Where are we going? I hope we can get it back on track and have a great finish. And when it was done, part of it is expectations versus what you get, that disappointment factors in. But I was left really wanting with how they resolved this movie. And it felt like you have all the pieces here. You could make it happen. Yeah. But again, I really thought that Rami Malek didn't deliver anything that any other person could have delivered in this.
I think his acting styles sometimes it feels off, but for some reason I like it. I liked him in Mr. Robot, and of course everybody loved him in that Queen movie.
Sure.
But I don't know. I kind of like his style, but I could see why people wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. So you already said your score for The Little Things was 2 stars?
It was 2 stars, yeah. Oop.
Yeah, there it is. And I believe I entered in a 2.5 star for mine. Does that look right? Yeah, 2.5 stars. A big disappointment from what I was hoping it would be. I was looking forward to something great with Denzel, and we did not get that. So unfortunate, the little things. The next movie we have, though, is a film from, I believe this was on the Apple TV, correct? Called Palmer, from director Fisher Stevens. I love Fisher Stevens from back in the day. Stars Justin Timberlake as a man named Palmer, the titular character. Palmer has come home from prison. He is living with his grandmother, Vivian, played by June Squibb. Living with his grandma means he's got to follow her rules. He's also dealing with the scorn from the people in his small town that he lives in, as he's out looking for a job, because he just got out of prison. Everybody knows everybody in this town, and he had a fall from grace. A high school quarterback, went to LSU, going to be the guy who makes it out of this town and ends up in prison and right back living with grandma. Vivian also has taken in a young boy named Sam, played by Ryder Allen. Sam's mother disappears on long benders and just leaves Sam, and so Vivian has taken him in, and Sam loves Vivian, and she allows him to be who he wants to be, and who he wants to be is a boy who loves princesses and dolls and dressing like a girl. And Palmer does not understand this at all. These are all things that Palmer kind of internally doesn't understand, and I think kind of despises about Sam. Unfortunately, kind of early on in the movie, Vivian passes away, and now Palmer is left to care for Sam. And he kind of immediately tries to unload him onto the cops, but he realizes that Sam will end up in the foster care system, and he has a heart for him and doesn't want him to see that happen. Palmer also has his old friends who aren't necessarily good for him or understanding of his situation. And it's kind of this slow burn as he kind of barely tolerates this cheery, upbeat kid, and he doesn't get why he is the way he is. But Palmer's a guy who prefers to be alone, preferably with a beer in his hand, and just they are not ones that mesh together. But really, the thrust of this story is whether Sam can kind of get Palmer to change. And it's an interesting journey. And I think Justin Timberlake was really good in this movie as a guy who takes that journey.
I think they cast this one perfectly.
Yeah.
Justin Timberlake, he is a likable guy. He's kind of like Tom Hanks for
I
me.
love him. I love me some JT.
Everything he's in, he is just fantastic. But he can still play kind of a gritty character, a manly character. And that slow burn that you mentioned made this film fantastic for me. I loved how it wasn't a turn on a dime. All of a sudden, he's like, "Oh yeah, I like this kid."
Right.
It was slowly over time, and it showed caring. And I really, really appreciated that about this movie. Everything felt real. Things didn't turn on a dime, but it was still an upbeat movie. There's tragedy in here and sad parts, but for the most part, having a likable guy like Justin Timberlake and Ryder Allen, he was also fantastic.
He was great.
He was such a lovable character.
He could have been annoying. Like I could see this because he is like the bubbly kid, blah, 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 and sometimes those kid roles get annoying.
Yeah.
Or nobody talks like this. They have kids talking like adults, and you're like, nobody really talks like this.
Yeah.
But he was like he had the right amount of just effervescence, and he's in a terrible situation, but it doesn't really affect him. Like he was really good in this.
I love this movie. I thought this was fantastic. My only complaints really was some of the acting by the Sam's parents.
Sure. Juno
thought,
Temple is his mom.
Yeah, I thought she was off, and her boyfriend was even more off. I
felt like they were playing caricatures of what you would expect.
Yeah.
The people who live in the trailer next to you, and they're always yelling and fighting and taking off on benders.
Yeah.
I felt like they were just like, oh yeah, I've seen this character before. I know how to play this.
It's pretty much everybody around Justin Timberlake and Ryder Allen that I had a beef with.
I did like Alicia Wainwright, who played Maggie, who was working at the school and became a romantic angle for Palmer. I like her in this as kind of someone who was helping him through this journey. It was kind of there when Vivian left the picture. I like that it's not an easy story to tell because it is tough, and he did try and dump this kid off immediately.
Yeah.
But it's also a story that is playing out every day in America.
Yeah.
And you also have the the bullying that Sam had to go through constantly and how he dealt with the bullying of just being who he wants to be. I want to dress up as the fairy princess for Halloween. And Palmer's like, you're going to get beat up. And part of him is like, I know, because I was probably that guy in high school who beat up kids like you.
Yeah.
But now I see the other side of it. And I think it's an important story to tell.
Yeah.
So,
I completely agree.
What did you end up giving Palmer?
I give it a 3.5. I really recommend this movie. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I believe I gave it the same score, 3.5 stars from both of us. That's a lie. I think it's supposed to be 3.5. I get confused sometimes. Yeah, I agree. Palmer's a great one. It's over on Apple Plus, Apple TV. Check that out.
There's really not much going on for Apple Plus,
Yeah.
but there's a few gems every once in a while.
They throw something at you. Sir, let's jump into our throwback segment. We're talking about music biopics right now, and here we are in our second week. What are we talking about?
Talk about Love and Mercy back in 2014. It's not often that we go with something less than 10 years.
Yeah.
But every once in a while.
Every once in a while we stick one in there.
Directed by Bill Poland. This is a story of the Beach Boys, mostly Brian Williams.
Brian Wilson.
Or Brian Wilson, and his struggles with his mental illness. It flashes back and forth from a younger Brian to an older Brian. Brian played by John Cusack and Paul Dano, depending on what age you're looking at. And we also have a love interest with Melinda Ledbetter, played by Elizabeth Banks. Truthfully, not a big fan of Beach Boys, but this makes me a little bit more a fan of Brian Wilson.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a Beach Boys guy. I feel like all their music kind of sounds the same. This movie, though, I think is great. Like, because you see two parts of them, and I like that they didn't focus on the infamous bed years that Brian Wilson had. I mean, he basically spent 3 years laying in bed.
Yeah, they mentioned it.
They mention it, but they don't focus on it. And a lot of people, that's when you talk about later years, Brian Wilson's like, oh yeah, he became a recluse who just stayed in bed forever.
Yeah.
But we got to see kind of him as a young man, a creative force, creating. Like some of my favorite scenes in here were him in the studio and how they created the sound of Beach Boys. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? It's pretty wild what they're able to do.
Yeah.
It may not be my bag. Appreciate it. And then the older version where he's under the care of his doctor, played by Paul Giamatti, who's basically controlling every aspect of his life and over medicating him, and you see the troubles he's going through, and you see in his young life how his overbearing father kind of probably echoed bookends of his life of these people who domineered his life for him. And I think great performances all throughout. Paul Dano's great. I think John Cusack's really good in this.
Elizabeth Banks, I like her as a comedic actress. She was good in this.
She's a lady who wouldn't give up on him. Wouldn't let him wouldn't walk away and let him, Dr. Landy sink his claws into him deeper.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. It's a movie about light and darkness to me. Of like, you see the light of the genius that he is, and the darkness that his mental illness wreaked on him.
Only if he can make his lyrics better. I mean, really.
A lot of stuff about beaches. I don't know. For a person who's not a fan of the Beach Boys, this opened my eyes. It actually led me to watching a Beach Boys documentary right after it. Like, oh, we can find this, watch this. Pretty interesting. And it was shot during the bed years, so the whole documentary is everyone else talking, and then they cut to Brian, and he's got the covers up to his neck, and then they play the music, and it's like, okay, this is pretty great.
Do you have a favorite Beach Boys song?
I don't know. They all sound the same.
Yeah.
I think there's something about a car.
Little
Maybe a
Bit
girl.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I know that one too.
beach?
That's all of them. That's plenty.
It's terrible because I know that like Pet Sounds is always talked about as like one of the great albums of all time. I think technically they're great musicians.
Yeah.
Just not for me. I don't know.
There you go.
That's just. But Love and Mercy, I think, is a film that is worth your time, worth checking out.
Yeah.
Good music biopic.
There you go.
Sir, let's take a look ahead, though, at some films that are going to be coming soon. I'm looking at the weekend of February 12th. We have something coming onto Hulu that we have, I think, alternately enjoyed and detested. The new season of Into the Dark is coming with a film called Tentacles.
All right. Well,
so we have that.
It's been a hit and miss.
It has.
More misses, but that one hit that I liked They'll make me watch this.
Was Into the Dark the one that also had the one about the people who moved into the house that couldn't get out?
That one was a miss.
That was not good.
And then they had that President. But they had the dog one.
The dog
I love the dog one.
So we're going to have Tentacles that week of February 12th. We also have a film on Amazon called The Map of Tiny Perfect Things. It's a film about two teens who relive the same day repeatedly, much like a Groundhog Day scenario. And this enables them to create the titular map of perfect things. I don't know. I'm kind of curious for this one.
Yeah.
We also have
Groundhog Day scenario.
Yeah. We also have a movie on HBO Max that I'm really looking forward to. It's called Judas and the Black Messiah. It is the true story of Fred Hampton, who is the chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party, and a betrayal that was pretty tragic. Stars Daniel Kaluuya, Lakeith Stanfield, and Jesse Plemons. I'm really intrigued by that.
I'll do my best not to research.
Please don't. Remember when you researched Sorry to Bother You and you realized, like, wow, but this never happened?
I was really... those
horse people?
I could have sworn I saw that in the news once.
Oh, man. Before we move any further, though, we have to take the time to thank our sponsor, Marcus Theaters, The Palace, here in Sun Prairie. Thank you for sponsoring this program, and thank you for all the things you're doing out in the community. And you have movies showing. If you like watching movies inside of a theater, we have one. And you can check it out. You can order your tickets safely and go in and sit in a clean environment and watch your movie with 9 other people in your theater. I believe are still the restrictions. So Marcus Theaters, always a joy to sit in a Dream Lounger. I'm still working on getting a Dream Lounger into my house. I'm like, hey, you're not using all the seats. You could always bring one over to my place.
They do sell those chairs, but it's not the same.
I need a J13 brought to my house. That's what I need.
Keep mentioning that.
I'm just saying.
You're jinxing yourself.
No. I'll fight someone for J13. Next week, sir, we got a few movies that we're going to be talking about. First, we have a film called Bliss. That's that Salma Hayek and Owen Wilson movie.
Yeah.
We have Space Sweepers, which is a South Korean sci-fi joint. Little Big Women, the Taiwanese drama. Malcolm and Marie, which is a film I'm super excited for. Stars John David Washington. And a throwback, again, another music biopic.
Ooh.
And I'm excited for this one.
I sense a theme. We need like one of those, custom drawn theme picture. Yeah. If you could work on that, thank you.
I got nothing else to do. Check it out.
Yeah,
I'll work on. By the time we're done with the series, I should have it ready to go. But next week we're gonna do a music throwback for a fun little all-girl group that I'm very excited for, with a really fun cast.
Is it Josie and the Pussycat?
Ooh, I don't think they're real, Mike.
Oh.
I know you watch them every Saturday morning. Speaking of hand-drawn, I don't think they're real.
I don't believe that.
No.
I think you're wrong.
Well, we'll find out next week what we're actually going to be talking about. But until that time, I'm Jameson.
I'm Mike Roth.
Thanks for watching.